Hi guys, Miss Davis here, ready for day 7 of the Anne Frank series. So I'm going to skip a little bit, just a journal entry or two, to exciting part where some things happen. They get some news from the outside world in these entries, and they get a person from the outside world in these entries. So it does take a little bit of a serious turn, but I think all for good effect. And so, without further ado, the continuation of the Diary of Anne Frank. Monday, November 9th, 1942. Dear Kitty, yesterday was Peter's birthday. He was 16. He had some nice presents, among other things a game of Monopoly, a razor, and a lighter. And not that he smokes much. It's really just for show. The biggest surprise came from Mr. Van Daan when, at 1 o'clock, he announced that the British had landed in Tunis, Algiers, Casablanca, and Oran. This is the beginning of the end, everyone was saying. But Churchill, the British Prime Minister, who had probably heard the same thing in England, said, "This is not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end. But it is, perhaps, the end of the beginning." Do you see the difference? There is certainly reason for optimism. Stalingrad, the Russian town which they've already been defeating for 3 months, still hasn't fallen into German hands. But to return to affairs in our secret den, I must tell you something about our food supply. As you know, we have some real greedy pigs on the top floor. We get our bread from a nice baker, a friend of Kufia's. We don't get so much as we used to at home, naturally, but it's sufficient. 4 ration cards have also been bought illegally. Their price is going up all the time. It's now gone up from 27 florins to 33. All that for a little slip of printed paper. In order to have something in the house that will keep, apart from our 150 tins of vegetables, we've brought 270 pounds of dried peas and beans. They are not all for us. Some are for the office people. They are in sacks which hang on hooks in our little passage, inside the hidden door. Owing to the weight of its contents, a few stitches in the sacks burst open, so we decided it would be better to put our winter store up in the attic, and Peter was given the job of dragging it all up there. He had managed to get 5 of the 6 sacks upstairs intact, and he was just busy pulling up number 6 when the bottom seam of the sack split and a shower, no, a positive hailstorm of brown beans came pouring down and rattled down the stairs. There were about 50 pounds in the sack, and the noise was enough to wake the dead. Downstairs they thought the whole house, with all its contents, was coming down on them. Thank God there were no strangers in the house. It gave Peter a moment's fright, but he was soon roaring with laughter, especially when he saw me standing at the bottom of the stairs like a little island in the middle of a sea of beans. Was entirely surrounded up to my ankles in beans. Quickly we started to pick them up, but beans are so slippery and small that they seem to roll into all the possible and impossible corners and holes, and now any time anyone goes downstairs they bend down once or twice in order to be able to present Mrs. Van Daan with a handful of beans. I almost forgotten to mention that Daddy is quite better again. Yours, Anne. P.S. The news has just come over the radio that Algiers has fallen. Morocco, Casablanca, and Oran have been in British hands for several days. Now we're waiting for Tunis. So the end of this entry, I like it. There's a little blend of the silly, the mundane, the everyday life, and this injection of news from the outside world about the war. And one of my, like a really profound line is that, it's not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end. So I think that it just, again, is reminiscent of the time that we're going through. I mean, I live in New York. So people are thinking, oh, spring is coming, maybe this is the end. And that's sort of my thought. This is not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end. It might be the end of the beginning. But, I mean, we have a long way left to go with this whole quarantine and coronavirus social distancing. And I don't know when I'm going back to school. And it seems to me, whose whole life is at school? Interminably long, but I have to remember and remind myself that one, it's not that bad, and two, it's probably a far cry from over. Next journal entry, Tuesday, November 10th, 1942. Great news. We want to take in an 8th person. Yes, really. We've always thought that there was quite enough room and food for one more. We were only afraid of giving Kufius and Krayler more trouble, but now that the appalling stories we hear about Jews are getting even worse, Daddy got a hold of the 2 people who had who had to decide, and they thought it was an excellent plan. It's just as dangerous for 7 people as for 8, they said, and quite rightly. When this was all settled, we ran through our circle of friends, trying to think of a single person who would fit in well with our family. It wasn't difficult to hit on someone. After Daddy had refused all members of the Van Daan family, we chose a dentist called Albert Dussel, whose wife was fortunate enough to be out of the country when war broke out. He is known to be quiet, and so far as we and Mr. Van Daan can judge from a superficial acquaintance, both families think he's a congenial person. Miep knows him too, so he'll be able to make arrangements for him to join us. If he comes, he will have to sleep in my room instead of Margot, who will use the camp bed. Yours, Anne. Thursday, the 12th of November, 1942. Dear Kitty, Dussel was awfully pleased when Miep told him that she has got a hiding place for him. She urged him to come as soon as possible, preferably Saturday. He thought that this was rather doubtful, since he had to bring his card index up to date first, see to a couple of patients, and settle his accounts. Miep came to us with this news this morning. We thought it was unwise of him to put it off. All these preparations entail explanations to a number of people, whom we would rather keep out of it. Miep is going to ask if he can't manage to come in on Saturday after all. Dussel said no. Now he's coming on Monday. I must say, I think it's pretty crazy that he doesn't jump at the proposal, whatever it is. If he were to get picked up outside, would he still be able to do his card index, settle his finances, and see to his patients? Why delay then? I think it's stupid of Daddy to have given in. No other news, Anne. So this is exciting news. I mean, someone else coming in. And so here's the thing. What they're doing, what Miep is doing in helping to shelter and hide away and secret away these Jews from the clutches of the Nazis, it's really quite dangerous work. And I mean, one thing sort of leads to another, and so there's so many loose ends that need to be tied. People don't just disappear, so they have to make sure that everything's like properly timed and well laid out, and there's a backstory for everything, and it's really dangerous. It reminds me that to put yourself at risk to help somebody else. This reminds me of a movie that I saw once. I sometimes show Freedom Writers to my students, and in that film, and it's based on a real life story. A group of students read the Diary of Anne Frank with their teacher, and they get this idea that they would like to bring Miep Gies in to their school to talk to them about her experiences. And while she's there, one of the students looks at her and says, "I've never had a hero before, but you are my hero." And she corrects him. She says, no, I'm not a hero. I'm just, a person doing the right thing. And she says something in the film. She says, I think the best that we can do is to be a small light in a dark room. And so for a person like Mr. Dussel, I mean, this is more than a small light. This is a saving grace. And they're really taking a big risk to help him. And it reminds me of the value of human life and how much we are all worth. And it reminds me that I don't have to be a big hero. I just have to do the right thing. Interesting. Next journal entry, dated Tuesday, November 17th, 1942. Dear Kitty, Dussel has arrived. All went well. Miep had told him that he must be at a special place in front of the post office at 11 o'clock, where a man would meet him. Dussel was standing at the rendezvous dead on time. Mr. Kufius, who knows Dussel too, went up to him and told him that the said gentleman would not come, but asked whether he would just go to Miep at the office. Kufius got into a tram and went back to the office while Dussel walked in the same direction. At 11:20, Dussel tapped at the office door. Miep helped him off with his coat so that the yellow star would not be seen, and took him to the private office where Kufius engaged him in conversation until the charwoman had gone. Then Miep went upstairs with Dussel under the pretext that the private office was needed for something, opened the swinging cupboard, and stepped inside before the eyes of the dumbfounded Dussel. We all sat around the table upstairs waiting with coffee and cognac to greet the newcomer. Miep showed him into our sitting room first. He recognized our furniture at once, and he had not the remotest idea that we were there, above his head. When Miep told him, he nearly passed out with surprise. But luckily Miep didn't give him much time and took him straight upstairs. Dussel sank into a chair speechless and looked at us all for a while as if he really had to take it all in first. After a while he stuttered, But, aber, sind you not in Belgium then? Is der Militar nicht come das Auto? The escape is nicht successful? We explained everything to him, that we had spread the story about the soldiers and the car on purpose to put people, and especially the Germans, on the wrong track, should they find us. Dussel was again struck dumb by such ingenuity, and when he had explored further our super practical, exquisite little secret annex, he could do nothing but gaze about him in astonishment. We had lunch together. Then he had a little nap and joined us for tea, tidied up his things a bit. Miep had brought them beforehand, and began to feel more at home, especially when he received the following typed Secret Annex rules. So I'm going to skip the reading of the rules just to save a little bit of time. But again, this man is incredibly, incredibly lucky to have been whisked away. And the level of elaborateness and the level of sophistication with which people have to hide and squirrel away and deceive in order to save their own lives is really quite humbling for me. Next entry is dated Thursday, November 19th, 1942. Dear Kitty, Dussel is a very nice man, just as we all had imagined. Of course, he thought it was all right to share my little room. Quite honestly, I'm not so keen that a stranger should use my things, but one must be prepared to make some sacrifices for a good cause. So I shall make my little offering with goodwill. If we can save someone, then everything else is of secondary importance, says Daddy. And he's absolutely right. The first day that Dussel was there, he immediately asked me all sorts of questions. When does the charwoman come? When can one use the bathroom? When is one allowed to use the lavatory? Well, you may laugh, but these things are not so simple in a hiding place. During the day, we mustn't make any noise that might be heard downstairs, and if there is some stranger, charwoman, for example, oh goodness gracious, sorry, such as the charwoman, for example, lost my spot, one sec. Then we have to be extra careful. I explained all this carefully to Dussel, but one thing has amazed me. He's a little slow on the uptake. He asks everything twice over and still doesn't seem to remember. Perhaps that will wear off in time, and it's only that he's thoroughly upset by the sudden change. Apart from that, all goes well. Dussel has told us a lot about the outside world, which we've missed for so long now. He had very sad news. Countless friends and acquaintances have gone to a terrible fate. Evening after evening, the green and gray army lorries trundle past. The Germans ring at every front door to inquire if there are any Jews living in the house. If there are, then the whole family has to go at once. If they don't find any, they go on to the next house. No one has a chance of evading them unless one goes into hiding. Often they go around with lists and only ring when they know they can get a good haul. Sometimes they let them off for cash, so much per head. It seems like the slave hunts of olden times, but it's certainly no joke. It's much too tragic for that. In the evenings when it's dark, I often see rows of good, innocent people, accompanied by crying children, walking on, in charge of a couple of these chaps, bullied and knocked about until they almost drop. No one is spared. Old people, babies, expectant mothers, the sick. Each and all join in the march of death. Goodness, sorry. How fortunate we are here, so well cared for and undisturbed. We wouldn't have to worry about all this misery were it not that we were so anxious about all those dear to us, who we can no longer help. I feel wicked, sleeping in a warm bed while my dearest friends have been knocked down or have fallen into a gutter somewhere out in the cold night. I get frightened when I think of close friends who have now been delivered into the hands of the cruelest brutes that walk the earth, and all because they are Jews. Yours, Anne. So that's where I'm going to stop for the day, mostly because we're almost out of time and mostly because I can't take any more. It's so incredibly overwhelming when you think about these people hiding in the middle, in the epicenter of tragedy, and they're like, kind of cloistered, hidden away, and all around them, everything is happening, bad things happening to people that they know and they love, and they can't really do much of anything to stop it, and they certainly can't go outside, so lest they expose themselves to the same danger. So again, that's a real similarity that I'm seeing in this crazy time. So That's all we have for today, and I'll see you tomorrow.